Good evening, guys, and happy Monday to all your sunshiny faces. It's weird, my dad's gonna be home from work tomorrow. He has like a doctor's appointment thing, so I was like, oh, today must be Sunday. And then I was like, wait, no, it can't be Sunday because my dad's gonna be home from work tomorrow. And then I was like, oh, so it must be Saturday. I don't know what I was thinking. No, it is Monday, but oh my goodness, do you guys see the light reflecting off of my mirror over there? Anyways, well, guys, it is really cold out right now, and like today has been insanely cold. I don't know if you guys can tell too, my nose sounds like it's stuffed up. Honestly, I think it's because we have a whole bunch of space heaters going, which I will get into. I have a whole story about how cold it is, and why I'm actually going to bed early tonight is because of yesterday night, and probably was because of the cold. But I actually have a little tiny itty bitty little space heater down in here, because it's like super small, but because with normally my room has been fairly warm, but I like have my door closed. I slept in here like overnight, you know, like with the door closed, and the furnace was running a decent amount. However, because all the other space heaters, like we have one in the kitchen, one in the living room, and there's been one in the back bedroom just because of the glass door back there, like we've turned it on and turned it off, but like it's just kind of been there. Like if it gets really cold, then we turn that one on, or colder. But the ones in the kitchen, the living room, we just brought in because of, like, you know, again too, I was telling you guys that we had the issue with the furnace before, where the furnace might actually be a little bit too small for the size house that we have, and we've had the issue twice now where, because it's been running so much, it ended up like there's this buildup that gets on the sensor because it like runs too much. And we had it happen last year, and we had it happen again this year, at like the very beginning of like fall. Well, I don't think it was the very beginning, I think it was like in November or something like that. But we had that, like Matthew's friend came out and fixed it for us the second time. But you know, like if it runs too much, and like especially too like right now because it's really cold, and like it just keeps running constantly and like doesn't turn off, then it can affect that sensor again, and we'd have to go through this whole big thing. We'd have to take all this stuff like off of it, like out of it, like the furnace and everything like that, to actually clean the sensor again. It's just, I guess it's, you know, like again, when my dad did it last year, it was a huge pain because he didn't have like the proper tools. Matthew's friend came and did it for us this year, thankfully, so we didn't have to do it, because like I said, it was a huge big process, just because like my dad was trying to do it with like screwdriver that like wasn't long enough, and like all this kind of stuff. I think if I remember correctly from last year, it was just a big pain. So to try and avoid that, since it has been, I think it's -3 degrees right now, I think it was a high of like maybe 8 degrees or 9 degrees, but it's also windy today, so it's like even colder. I don't know what the real feel is for today, but like the wind chill plus wind chill is probably like negative something, but it's like the high for today really. But you know, so it was really cold, and in order to like kind of compensate for that, we have a few space heaters set up around the house. However, because the furnace has, like, it's been, you know, not running quite as much because we've been overcompensating for the you know, with the heaters, and because my room is now like so far away from, like, you know, before when it was in the interior of the house, like Jack's room is still pretty warm, but my room has been really cold because I only have the furnace heat that's coming in here, and because it hasn't been running as much and it's so cold outside, my room was about 10 degrees colder. I did check this, it was 10 degrees colder in my room than it was in the rest of the house. So I have a little tiny space heater in here, but I think it's kicking up my allergies and I'm a little stuffed up. So Charlie is actually behind me right now. He is actually wearing, I don't know if you guys can tell, he's wearing his Notre Dame shirt today. We were watching the national championship game, and you guys can tell who we were rooting for, right, Charlie? But anyways, back to the story about how cold it was. So I went to bed last night and I was like almost asleep all of a sudden, and I heard Jack. I got out of the shower, I got in bed, I got comfortable because I told you guys my neck had been hurting. Today was actually a lot better. It was still hurting a little bit a couple times throughout the day, but much better even still than yesterday. So I do think that I am on the mend now and it is feeling a lot better. And again too, I've been trying to do some stretches and things like that to try and help a little bit, but not trying to like overdo it. So I have been feeling a lot better today. But like last night I got comfortable, and again too, it was probably the best, like most comfortable that I had gotten, like trying to sleep, because that was the problem. My neck has been hurting, so it's been really uncomfortable for me like sleeping. So I finally get in bed. I like get all comfortable. I got out of the shower and like laid in bed. All of a sudden I hear Jack. He gets up, he like went to the bathroom. Then after I was done in the shower, I heard him like a few minutes even before that, he was like playing with his friends online, so like I could hear him. And then I heard him go to the bathroom, and I heard him go to bed. Like just at what felt like a few minutes after that, I heard this like loud bang noise, and I was like, oh, it sounds like Jack either like, I don't know, stumbled, tripped, dropped something, you know, whatever. But both my parents come like running downstairs, and they were like, what was that? You know, like they were like, was that you? And initially they went to the bathroom and was like knocking on the bathroom door. I think they thought I was still taking a shower. So they were like knocking on the door. They were like, what was that noise? You know, like eventually they came in my room. They asked me that. They were like, what was that noise? They asked Jack, and I was like, I don't know. I think it came from Jack's room. So my mom goes and, like I said, she goes over there, and then she asks him. And I hear them too. Like they went outside, and it sounded like they were like, I heard them initially like went outside because I heard the sliding back like glass door, and I was like almost asleep when I heard this noise. And then like I kind of fell a little bit back asleep, but then when my mom came back in here, I like woke right back up, because I was like, okay, she's asking me questions now. Like my brain was awake again. So she's like, oh, you know, like, did you hear that too? And I was like, yeah, it sounded like it came from Jack. Like I think he dropped his water bottle. And she's like, no, Jack's like fast asleep. And I was like, no, he was not. I was like, he was literally up like 3 minutes ago going to the bathroom. And I was like, make sure it wasn't him, like he didn't drop something, or you know, like I said, it sounded like his water bottle, like it sounded like wood kind of, but like something else, like, you know, it sounded like a rumble through the house, you know, like if you like something heavy kind of hits the floor. But again, I couldn't really tell, and it sounded like it was coming from that end of the house. And again too, so like my parents were like, okay, whatever. They like looked around the house. They were like, they didn't see anything. They went back to bed. Then like a handful of minutes after that, I think maybe my dad was still awake. Like then he might have just decided he was going to get up for work at that point, because it was like he gets up at work for like 3 in the morning. And like I said, I went to bed probably around 1 or 2 o'clock or something like that. So I was like almost asleep when we like all this stuff started happening. Then we hear it again, and my mom this time I think was alone, and she was like, I heard it sounded like it was in the attic. She came back in my room and asked me if I heard it again. I am almost asleep at this point again too, and I like vaguely heard something, but because I was falling back asleep, I couldn't tell if they were still awake looking for it, or like what was going on, because I was like still trying to fall asleep. And like this was probably by around 3 o'clock or something like that, because I think the first one happened like around 2 o'clock or something again, when I was like almost asleep. Then I'm almost asleep again by like closer to 3 o'clock, and it happens again. So finally my dad goes and he like looks outside, like he's got a flashlight, and like I see him too, like I see the lights like are like coming through my windows and stuff like that. And like Charlie's freaked out too, and I'm like, what is that noise? We still don't really know what it was. However, what we think it might have been, because like it sounded like a loud, like a bang kind of noise, not necessarily like a rumble through the house or anything like that, but it did sound like it was very loud enough that kind of woke all of us up. But we think it was possibly from the cold and like maybe the wood in the attic or something like that actually maybe expanding, because when the furnace was going, or when the water heater was going and like warming up, it might have been like releasing like the, you know, and like also to the vent for the exhaust for like the furnace and stuff like that, was possibly because it gets really hot. So like it could have been releasing like, you know, again, hot air into the attic, and it could have been like the beams or like other wood that's around it or whatever, possibly getting warm then and expanding from it being cold, and then it was like expanding and stuff like that. And that could have been like the popping noise that we heard, because we didn't really hear it again after that, like after the shower. And so like, and it was weird, like, but my dad said even too, like once he took a shower in the morning, he heard like noises like more underneath like the floor, kind of like the pipes like were making like noises, like the hot water like moving through the pipes. So while again too, the pipes aren't frozen or anything like that, it's just probably because it's so cold and like stuff is like heating and expanding and stuff like that. And from like the cold too, like, you know, it was like making some kind of weird noise like in the house. But again too, it sounded loud and it was kind of freaky. But that was why it took me a really long time to fall asleep last night, because like this happened a few different times, and then my parents both every single time like came and were like asking me if I heard that, and I was like, yeah, I heard that. I was like, I don't know what you want me to do about it. But they looked and they never found anything, like nothing, like, you know, like there was no like shelves that fell off the wall somewhere, you know, like no walls fell down anywhere either, but like we couldn't really figure it out. So it was weird. You know, it was a little bit strange. We still don't exactly know, but that was kind of what we were thinking too, especially like the time it corresponded with, you know, like the shower and then maybe the hot water heater heating back up and stuff like that even too. But it was just really weird thing. And it was loud enough that, like I said, woke multiple people up, and then, you know, like, and it kept me awake too, because then, like I said, my parents came back in and were like, did you hear that? And then my dad's looking around outside with the flashlight, because my mom's like, it sounds like it's like in the attic or like coming from like the roof or something like that. So she was scared, she couldn't sleep, she's thinking like the roof is gonna cave in or something like that. And so yeah, I ended up actually like waking up then also really early this morning at like 9:30, which is early for me. But and I went to bed very late last night. I think I got around 6 hours of sleep, which again too isn't that bad, but I'm kind of tired, and I'm thinking I'm gonna take a shower and probably get to bed now. So I'll see you guys in tomorrow's vlog. If you guys did enjoy today's, make sure you guys give a big old thumbs up. If you guys are new, I'd love it if you'd subscribe, and I'll see all of your sunshiny faces tomorrow. So bye guys.